As many of you know, we've got pieces of paper for those that would like to ask questions that will be collected if you want to write out what you want and send it forward. Also, on Monday, Paul Kerwin had asked and encouraged some of you to provide some questions early on, so we'll start with those in hopes that we will have some others that come from you at this point in time. One of the things that is clearly on people's mind as you talk about many of these different options for the future is how do you help foster more robust analysis for alternatives to incorporate the better diverse data and sensor types that you believe to be needed to be collected appropriate data for rapid characterization. Now, I've mentioned some of JMS, but I know you have other activities that worked on.
There is a widely recognized shortfall in our modeling and simulation capability in the space business. There's a very active effort between my analysis folks in Air Force Space Command and the analysis folks at Headquarters Air Force to bring up our ability to do modeling and simulation in the space domain, not only for the sake of space, but also for the larger campaign analysis. So you can see how various space capabilities fit into overall campaigns, what difference it makes, the presence or absence of space capability, what does it mean to the overall campaign. So I'm pretty excited that we're on a very robust path to improve our M&S capabilities in the space business. And I think that's how we're going to get much better in deciding what sensors we need and what sensors we can perhaps do without.
A little bit more of a technical question. As you know, with many of these sensors, one of the fundamental things that give you the precision and the common situational awareness is the business of timing. And that is not a same time GPS time all over. And the question is, how are you sort of viewing to ensure that as you move towards this fusion of sensor information, you can better emphasize this common timing needed for both the precision operations and the timely in these sensors?
Maybe out of my depth there in terms of actual time tagging things. I know that's going to be very important. The latency of data, particularly in a fast-moving area like space, is going to be something we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to. How we're going to get there at this point, I really don't know.
Okay, one of the things we haven't mentioned about today, of course, is the hat that you wear with your responsibilities for developing the cyber capabilities for the future for the Air Force. And there's some people are trying to rationalize and understand how space and cyber sort of go together, where they're uniquely different and where they're very, cyber is very supportive of space. So if you'd like to make a few comments on how you think about this dual-hatted responsibility you have, I think it would be useful.
I'll go back in history a little bit. I had the privilege of going down to CENTCOM headquarters right after 9/11 and being the first guy to run what was called a space and information operations element. So pushing space and then I/O, but now we would call that cyber today, pushing those things forward to the warfighter and giving them some added capabilities. And the one thing I learned from all that is that there is such a close linkage between space and cyber capabilities, and one enables the other. There are some times where a space solution is enabled by cyber. There are some times that a cyber solution is enabled by space. So having those together under a single command, I think, generates the kind of thought process and brings the people together that are experts in those two fields and kind of merges those. And hopefully, in the not-too-distant future, we'll be producing some integrated space and cyber solutions that will truly be game-changing. I think there's just a whole lot of unplowed field here for us to work in. One of the challenges in the cyber domain will continue to be the legal and policy regimes that are very immature. But we've kind of gone through some of that in the space business too. And even though we have policy that is fairly enabling in the space business, there are still a lot of lot of concerns still out there among our leadership on how far we're willing to go in space, and I think you're going to see the same kind of thing in cyber.
Some of the improvements in situational awareness have been heavily reliant on those sensors that are ITWA qualified. And the question, of course, is how do we see the evolution of the needs that you have to sort of move in a direction that will give you greater flexibility than the current process allows?
Yeah. Certainly the integrated tactical warning attack assessment discipline has been good for us in ensuring that attacks on the United States are well understood, or potential attacks are well understood, and that the data that's coming in is no kidding reliable data. However, that becomes, for the job we do in missile defense, for the job we do in space, it can become a detriment as opposed to a help. So we're working with Stratcom to try to find our way to maybe a more modern paradigm, if you will, where we can look at the discipline needed, the verification needed, the authoritative data sources, but not be wedded to a process that takes years and unfortunately tends to hold us back again a little bit. So hang with us a little bit. This is going to be an interesting challenge, trying to work our way through it. We've got a lot of people that have a lot of history in the ITWAA business, and that's the way we've always done it, and that's the way we should always do it, but not convinced that that's the right answer.
Unfortunately, you won't be here on Friday, and as you know, we have the international discussion on SSA, but we certainly would like to understand how you view the role for international cooperation, since that's one of the major space policy stated goals, and how you may think about going about making that your contribution to that.
I think JMS is going to help enable some of that international cooperation for sure, different data sources. But I tell you, there needs to be a bit of a quid pro quo in my mind. Certainly there's a level of data sharing just among spacefaring nations that probably needs to occur. But if we're going to get down to detailed sharing, moving from a JSPOC to a CSPOC, a coalition space operations center, or a combined space operations center, whatever you want the C to stand for, but basically an international center, there needs to be, in my mind, a quid pro quo. If you've got a sensor to contribute to this, great. We're willing to take in your sensor. We're willing to use that data as it contributes to SSA. But I'm not a proponent of just this all being on the back of the United States and not having a much more a free sharing internationally that is people putting in as well as taking out.
Again, on the cyber business, could you comment a little bit on the reliance of space systems and how we think about the protection through the cyber domain of making that a reality? That's different than just protecting the platform and such, but also the information, the processing, and all of that.
Using the cyber domain as part of the protection process?
In regards to making sure that your missions are successful with the information that they receive.
Yeah. You're probably, most of you anyway, are probably aware that we have a space protection program. It's a joint program between us, Air Force Space Command, and the NRO, where we look across the gamut of national security space capability and how can we best protect those capabilities, both on orbit and the data on the ground. So we'll be looking at, we've already looked a lot at the on-orbit capabilities and strategies for space protection, but we're also looking at the cyber domain for data reliability, data assurance, information assurance. And we'll also be looking at potential cyber solutions to some of that can't talk a whole lot about the details of that, but you just need to be aware that we've got a very robust program between us and the NRO that I think is making great progress.
One of the issues that you alluded to earlier is that we see the DARPA and others providing new capabilities and demonstrations. They're much quicker, and the question is, how do you ever transition into the more formalized 5001 process, or can you sort of start to think through ways in which to do more of the demonstrations that which can be operationalized?
Yeah, without getting into a lot of criticism of the acquisition process, besides the fact that it's way too slow and costs too much, we have seen the ability to acquire things much more rapidly through streamlined processes that the labs have, that FFRDCs have. There are so many constraints in the 5000 series acquisitions that it's just difficult for people to navigate their way through. Let me just, an example. JMS was going to be a $1.2 billion program that wasn't going to deliver final capability until about the 19 timeframe. That is way, way too long. Way too long, and way too much money, probably an order of magnitude too much money. So we've gone to an alternative plan on that, and I'll let others talk about that later. But we've gone the direction we've gone on JMS, the direction we've gone on SST, the direction we've gone on some other things, because, frankly, we just can't get there any other way with the amount of money that we've got and with the time that we've got available to us to fix some of these gaping holes in our capability. As the budgets get tighter, there might be some that would call for more oversight of the acquisition process and maybe even more reviews than we have today. I think I would go probably just the opposite direction. If anybody cared about my opinion on it, I'd say let's back off a little bit on some of the things that we require in the 5000 series. Let's get to much more rapid posture in things like space and cyber. Let's get to the place where we can efficiently and effectively spend what little cash we're going to have to spend. If you're eating up 30 to 40% of the available resource just in oversight, and I don't know if that's a good figure, but I bet it's not too far off, then what are you doing? If you can produce a commercial satellite for X, and you buy that darn near the same satellite on the military side, and it costs you 2 to 3X, it ought to be instructive. It ought to be instructive. In fact, I had one prominent member of a big satellite house tell me he doesn't even know how he would build a satellite that costs $1.5 billion per copy. He doesn't even know how he could get to that figure. I said, I do.
On space debris again, does the Air Force sort of see itself in the long term to be the traffic cop of space debris, or is that going to be a shared responsibility of more than one executive agent?
You know, the FAA has made some noise lately about perhaps taking over that mission for routine traffic control, if you will. And, you know, if they stepped up to that capability, I wouldn't be opposed to them doing that, you know, doing the routine catalog maintenance kind of thing, and then we would do the national security side of this and make sure that our capabilities were well protected and we understood what was going on in the environment. But I haven't seen the FAA step up to this in a big way yet, and so we tend to be the only game in town right now. I would like to see the FAA step up and take this on a little bit stronger. So we'll see where this goes in the future. It's certainly not going to be in the next year or two, but maybe 5-10 years down the road, we'll see the FFA take a much stronger stance here and take this over.
Well, in winding up, I have the critical question that people are anxious to understand.
That's not signed
At some
Rosenberg.
point in time,
That's not signed Rosenberg, is it?
At some point in time, lower funding, you no longer can do more with less. How are you going about thinking about addressing this reality?
Yeah. Here's my mantra, and I will continue to say this until I get capped in the knees or whatever happens. But no matter what happens in this coming budget environment, and by the way, this fall is going to be absolutely madness. It looks like the DoD reduction over the next 10 years is at about $500 billion right now. Already, $500 billion. If the sequester goes into effect in the law that was passed in early August, if this committee of 12 can't agree to further reductions on the order of $1.5 trillion, then $1.2 trillion in reductions kick in. The defense share of that is probably going to be another $400 to $500 million. Now, we know pretty well how we would do $500 million. We've got a pretty good handle on that right now. You'll see some debates on that over the fall, but we've got a pretty good handle. That will result in some significant force structure reductions in the Air Force. It will result in some force structure reductions in the other services. But no matter what you do with force structure, no matter what level it comes down to in any of the services, there is a foundational level of space and cyber capability that has to be there if you're going to remain a global power. Now, if we as a nation say we're going to go fortress America, we're going to retreat, we're not going to worry about being a global power anymore, projection of power out, we're going to go the way of some of these other countries that have drawn down their defense so far that there's just no way they can project power across the planet. If we go to that level, then all bets are off. But if we want to remain a global power, you can't say I'm going to stop doing GPS, or I'm going to stop doing missile warning, or I'm going to stop doing strategic level comms. The only thing that I see, I'm going to stop doing SSA. You're not going to do that. The only thing I see that's fungible in all that is how much bandwidth do I want to put on orbit for SATCOM? How much dedicated military bandwidth do I want to have on orbit? That's the only thing I see fungible. Everything else is minimal capability already today. Already today. It's not like we've got a bunch of excess capability up there for others to kind of chop at. So that's my mantra. We'll see how much of that survives. But I think there's a recognition, as we've gone through the process thus far, there's a recognition that you have to protect that capability. And so while other mission areas have taken some fairly significant reductions, space has not taken a commensurate share of that.
Well, we really appreciate the opportunity and the time you've taken to come and address it today. I know there's going to be a few minutes here right after we go into break that you'll be available maybe for just some local questions. But again, thank you ever so much, General Shelton.
My pleasure. Thank you.